Welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. On Mondays, you will receive direct therapeutic support from a licensed therapist or professional connected to the mental health field. They will provide therapeutic and educational resources to help you have a healthier relationship with your family members. On Wednesdays, you will receive direct tips and resources to help you get through the stuck places that prevent many people from having the relationships with their families and significant others that they desire. On Fridays, we want you to visit our blog, which can be found at www.blackmftmatters.com, which holds additional resources and action steps that you can begin implementing immediately to improve your relationships. This is necessary because we love that you are listening, but we want you to take action too. While you are there, please grab our A to Z Relationship Bootcamp and be provided with the skills you need to immediately communicate better within your relationships. Please note that while the therapists on podcasts are therapists, they do not serve as your therapist unless you have signed a confidential agreement with them confirming that relationship. Thank you in advance for listening, and we hope you are inspired. All right, it's time for the show. Here is your host, Dr. Connie Omari.
Hey, and welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Today's guest is Dr. Erika Dawkins. Hi, Dr. Dawkins.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Omari?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we are so happy to have you. Do you mind if I tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
No, go right ahead.
Awesome. Dr. Dawkins, who has a PsyD, is currently the clinical director of Chester Community Coalition and the school psychologist for Widener Partnership Charter School, a K-8 charter school in Chester, Pennsylvania. In 2014, she completed her doctorate of psychology and clinical psychology and master's of education in human sexuality at Widener University as part of one of their dual degree programs. Also, while at Widener, Dr. Dawkins completed the necessary training in school psychology and is a certified school psychologist in the state of Pennsylvania. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Howard University in 2008, graduating magna cum laude. Dr. Dawkins' clinical research interests include minority identity development, microaggressions, intersectionality, grief, trauma, couples therapy, human sexuality, and more recently, the impact that social media has on self-image and the development and maintenance of interpersonal relationships. In supporting young minorities around having positive, healthy relationships, Dr. Dawkins has had the opportunity to speak with many various challenges they face and how to navigate them. She has a passion for working with Brown women and families who are seeking to develop and maintain strong, healthy, intrapersonal and interpersonal relationships, often using her own life story to motivate and encourage those she encounters. Her belief is that transparency and communication are the keys to making the connections we desire. In 2019, Dr. Dawkins opened her boutique therapy, consulting, and coaching firm by the name of Revolutionary Perspectives. Her philosophy and objectives as the founder of Revolutionary Perspectives is to encourage radical change and inspire far-reaching impact. For self-care, Dr. Dawkins enjoys decorative planning or journaling, attending live music events, lifting weights, and traveling. Dr. Dawkins credits her success thus far to her faith in God, her family and friends who push her and challenge her at every turn, and her fearless run, full speed ahead attitude, knowing that even if she trips, she can always get back up and get back at it. Awesome. Yes. Dr. Dawkins, if you trip, you can get back up.
Always.
Keep running.
Always.
Wow.
Great.
Wow. Well, in a moment of transparency, we're going to be talking about self-esteem. So it's going to be all the more, it's going to be really relevant. But can you before we get into that, tell us, how did you get into this work?
Sure. So I became interested in psychology kind of after seeing some of my family navigate emotional wellness concerns. I think, like most folks in the field, they say either we get in the field to heal someone that we know or heal ourselves. And so looking to kind of support members of my family was one of the primary reasons that I got into this work and really became interested in undergrad when I saw kind of the way that folks navigated relationships, things that allowed conflict to be successful or not successful, things that allowed relationships to grow and flourish or even to end and seasons to end, really had me look and say kind of what are at the root or what can be sometimes at the root of having relationships be successful or unsuccessful, and started navigating that piece around communication. And that was super important and became kind of the focus of my work then going into grad school.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, well, just speaking of self-esteem, well, what do you think? How do you think self-esteem kind of ties into our overall quality of life?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about kind of the relationships that we have and that we grow and cultivate, the relationship with ourselves is oftentimes neglected until we get much older. And so when we think about the level of self-esteem and the value that we place on ourselves, we oftentimes really don't give active thought to it. It's something that gets influenced by other relationships that we have or interactions that we have throughout our lifetime. Folks sometimes that we have one encounter with can impact our self-esteem in ways that we don't really spend time thinking about. And so when we think about a culture, a society, those areas where we grow and cultivate relationships, it's really important that the images and the messages that we receive and the ones that we kind of generate internally help to feed our self-esteem. And so we have to be active participants in knowing how we feel about ourselves and then creating the way that we desire to feel about ourselves. And so that's a lot of the work that I do, especially with women and Black women, around messages that they have received growing up and that they continue to receive that shape how they're able to show up in the world.
I love it. I love it. Are there any particular issues with self-esteem that you see happening more amongst Black women or Black men?
So in terms of areas of self-esteem, I think here in the US, and I know in other cultures as well, colorism is one
I was
of
going
the
to ask you about that.
one of the biggest issues, at least in the Black community, right? We tout and will join together around the Black is beautiful imaging and messages against. I hate to say against, but kind of we will come together around that messaging in response to other cultures, making some attack on Black skin. But then within our culture, we have a level of hierarchy, whether it's spoken explicitly or unspoken. We have a level of hierarchy around which brown skin gets access to certain things or which brown skin is good, whether that comes with good hair, right? Whether that comes with good features. And I think that is one way and one area that we do ourselves a disservice around really understanding the complexity. And if we're making others consider the complexity within our culture, we also have to respect and appreciate the complexity within our culture.
Okay, that's very, very insightful. I'm going to ask you, and I'm sure it's self-explanatory, but can you explain a little bit more what colorism is?
Sure. So colorism is kind of the view that different shades or hues of a particular ethnic group is socially more respected or better or appreciated. And oftentimes that looks like lighter fairer skin, folks that are closer to a Eurocentric view of beauty,
Right.
are elevated and viewed as preferable versus darker skinned individuals. And so it's not something that is, only seen in African American cultures. It's
Right.
seen in African cultures. It's seen in Latinx culture.
Indian.
Indian, yes, exactly. So it's an issue that kind of permeates a lot of different ethnic groups.
So basically, no matter where you find yourself, the closer you are to white, the more the more in demand you are. Now, let me ask you this, because I learned this when Oprah did her series of dark skin and then she did light skin. I didn't know that light skin, because I'm brown, nice chocolate for those who haven't seen me or you. But light skinned people, like especially women, also find themselves like on a different, like they also experience like discrimination and difficulty. Like I remember when I watched the light skin, they said the girl, she had light skin, bless her heart, and long hair, and she said every day she'd have to run in the bathroom because all the dark skinned girls would like beat her up or try to beat her up because she was light skinned and long hair. Do you see things like that as well and do work with around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, so when we think about kind of the idealistic view of light-skinned folks with good hair being elevated, that oftentimes comes from outside of Black culture or outside of the ethnic culture. Then within the culture, because of kind of the outside culture elevating that aesthetic, within the culture, folks are trying to kind of reclaim that Black is beautiful. And in doing that, rather than saying, we all are beautiful.
You're Black and also beautiful.
Right.
They discriminate.
Correct. It is, because white culture is elevating you, we want to elevate the brown and dark folks. And really what's interesting is I think that there are probably other ends of the spectrum. I haven't seen the Oprah special that you're talking about, but one of the folks that I enjoy watching on YouTube, a beauty guru, her name is Naima Tang. She is incredibly gorgeous, and she is at the other end of the spectrum. Oftentimes has trouble finding beauty products that allow for her to contour her dark skin. Because at the other end of the spectrum, there is not shades that really appreciate how dark our Black skin can go.
That's true. That's a good point.
And so there is kind of this middleism, and like you said, we're kind of brown skin. So we sit at the middle of this kind of colorism spectrum where lighter is elevated by Eurocentric and white culture. And at the other end of the spectrum, folks they want to avoid getting too dark, or they want to avoid being seen as too dark, and that the middle is kind of what's elevated. When again,
so we in the in crowd. we on this
for now, but I tell you what,
now, right?
Summer is coming, and I lays out. I try to get dark as possible, all into the spectrum.
Just as you say this, and I'm just thinking, and I kind of want maybe some of your feedback in this, but I know you talk about relationships and stuff too, and I'm thinking about a good friend from college, bless her heart. She was light skinned with long hair, and she was pretty. I really did think she was attractive. That's my personal opinion. But I noticed in terms of dating, she had a really hard time. And I could tell, well, it was and again, you don't know what goes through people's personal business, but I thought that guys were being drawn to her because of what you're saying, because of that beauty fell into the light skin, long hair category, because she was a really good friend. Like she was a really good person. And she, I liked her. And so I would get angry that she would find herself in these relationships with men who saw her external beauty and never saw her. And then I hate to say it, but the next time a lighter one, with longer hair came by, they would leave her, and I don't know. Do you see kind of like those patterns, or is that like a unique thing that I kind of ran into with my friend?
I'm sure it's not unique. She's not the only person. The couples that I actually work with and have right now are black couples,
Right.
that oftentimes will are, you know, kind of close in shade. But, you know, I think one of the things that there are a number of theories about why we have certain attraction or, you know, kind of gravitate towards this ideal, especially with you mentioning that this person actively was seeking the lighter and the longer, right? Every time someone lighter with longer hair came along, that was more desired. And while that very well may have just been their preference, the idea that you could improve your relationship with someone who aesthetically was more accepted.
I
think is something that we deal with. Definitely in the culture, it's something that we've seen, you know, with folks saying, you know, even Kanye West, you know, you support him, you know, and as soon as he get on, he leaves, right? So, you know, I think
let him go. But anyway, let's stop.
So it's definitely something to think about. But, you know, I think one of the things that right now, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think there is this shift to understanding that going along with the Eurocentric idea and view of what is going to be sustainable and appropriate for our communities and families is not where it's at. And so I think that there is this shift even around kind of preference and desire to find that within kind of the Black community, even if that is someone who is fairer skinned, but finding that within the
community. How can we have this conversation? Because we can get on a podcast and we can educate people and we can talk about our experiences and we can talk about your research, but how do you have, I mean, I don't think even the friend that I'm talking about, like we haven't talked in a few years because, you know, our paths have kind of, you know, gone in different directions, but there's no ill blood. Like we actually traveled and left the country together, you know, but we never talked about, I mean, how do you have these conversations about, I think I'm even more comfortable talking with white people about race, especially if I feel like they're an ally to the Black community, than I am talking about color with other Black people. I mean, is that a useful skill? Is that something that we should be doing more of?
Well, I mean, I think it is tricky because there are layers. There are layers to what we've developed and internalized about how we view and see ourselves, right? There are messages and images that we may have grown up with, whether that is, you're so pretty, you have great hair, or you're so dark, you don't want to sit out in the sun, or, you know, you want to make sure that you find a partner that looks like this or has this. And so there are so many views about kind of how we should view ourselves. And then there are stacked by when we get out in the world and we see images on social media and in magazines and in ads. And for most of us growing up until recently, there wasn't representation. We didn't see Black families on TV. When we saw families sitting together, having meals, or, you know, we saw people really appreciating the way that they looked in advertisement, they were white or light, or they were, you know, kind of, again, that Eurocentric aesthetic. And the idea then was only white families sit down at dinner, only white families have healthy marriages that last, or really love themselves and pamper themselves. And so it is layered. We have to have these conversations not only on that personal level, but we have to have them systemically. We have to have them, you know, kind of in campaigns. We have to have them in corporations. We have to have them in media and in television. So it's not a one lane conversation, but I think it's worth discussing with friends and family because it's individualized. We can't just say that folks' preference is a reflection of kind of a lack of understanding of themselves or a self-image, self-esteem, or self-value issue.
Love it. Love it. Love it. This is great work. Great work. Well, I don't know if I really want to, I mean, I love the idea of self-esteem, but I think we are on a roll with this colorism. So we're going to make sure we weave this into the ongoing conversations. What is something that we wish Black families knew about how colorism affects our self-esteem?
Yeah. I think that one of the things is just a level of awareness. And so sometimes we consume information without really stopping to think about that experience.
Means, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually was in a clubhouse room earlier this week where someone was actually talking about feelings and being in their feelings. And someone said, I want to be in my feelings. I want that experience. And my offer to the conversation was, it's one thing to experience those feelings, to be able to acknowledge what is happening, to be able to be aware of what you are thinking and feeling based on what you're being confronted with. But it's another to live there. And so I would offer the same thing around colorism, right? So it's one thing for us to take in these images. It's one thing for us to be exposed to advertisement and to talk about what we are being confronted with around like skin lightening products, or, what we are being confronted with around not seeing representation in terms of shades in makeup or neutral clothes that is supposed to be matching your skin tone. But it is something completely different to then say, what impact does that have on you? What do you think about kind of the availability of those things and the right or the fact that everyone should be represented? Is there something that you can do about that? Is there something that you can do about the way that impacts you, as well as something that you can do about the representation at a deeper level? So not just feeling those feelings, not just having that experience, but then saying, how can I take what I'm experiencing and have an impact? How has it impacted me before, and have a better understanding of how I view myself, and then say, what can I do? What is my role in our community in addressing what I'm seeing?
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. How do we have, at the beginning, when I initially asked the question, you said it was about just the what goes on, like in my mind, I was summarizing that you were saying, like, the way we were internalizing how natural, some of this stuff is. Like, we're not conscious that we're doing it. It's when you said good hair, I knew exactly what you meant. And I don't think anybody has ever sat down and explained to me what that meant, but we just know, right? It's like this subconscious thing. So how do we make that more conscious? And then how do we unlearn those things? Because, my daughter is 6, and I regret that I was not the first person to really educate her about this. And I think I do a decent job of trying to help her to be aware of her Blackness, but my gosh, they got, she went to a school. How old was she? I think when she turned 3, and I had just cut off all her hair because, it wasn't growing. It wasn't even. So I just, she's 3, like, leave my baby alone. And honestly, she was aware that her hair and her texture and then her skin complexion was different. Mm-hmm. And it was at 3. Am I really? Come on. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still in shock. Like, maybe she was 4, but no, I think she was 3.
Yeah.
Between 3 and 4. That's early.
It is. But what I think you highlighted is, at that age, what kids notice is difference. They don't have there's no labeling. We then, as adults, attach good and bad to that. All children are recognizing is that it's different. And so we have a role and responsibility in terms of ascribing kind of the quality to what students and children are noticing at that age. So for that difference to be celebrated, that's what she will remember.
Well, we would do it at home, and then she would go to school, because I'm wondering if, even if children noticed that it was different, but then the children are responding to things that they hear their parents saying.
Mm-hmm. That's what I said. We have that
now has a good or bad connotation to it.
Exactly. And so we all have a responsibility. So of course, I'm sure you all are celebrating the difference at home, but then even at school, right? We have the instructor or the classroom manager, right, who is overhearing the conversation about difference, to be able to facilitate a conversation about that difference isn't bad. We all are different. Every single one of us, even a set of twins, is going to be different and unique in some ways. And that level of uniqueness has to be celebrated. And how do we do that? How do we acknowledge the ways that we are similar and the ways that we are different? And we celebrate everyone. There's room for that. But that has to be a part of kind of all of our language and practice, because again, like we talked about it, it's not just a personal issue, right? It's an issue that even when your daughter leaves daycare, we'll address at school, and then we'll address when she goes into college and then the workforce, right? It's something that we are going to come up because it's a systemic issue and problem.
I see. How does colorism harm us? Like, I think we've talked about how that it exists. I think we've talked about, what it looks like, but what are maybe, to be more specific, what are the long term, like what if we don't get this in check?
Sure. So I think it has both personal and kind of group implications. So some of the personal implications can be the unacknowledged, unaddressed, internalized references that we have around our color, the way that we show up, that we then pass on or pass down to other folks, even if we don't have biological children, even if we, come into contact with other people's children and families, it can really impact the way that we navigate issues around kind of shades of folks within our community. So I think about a family example all the time. I have a cousin, an older cousin, who really always talked about being out in the sun and getting darker. And it was one of those things that was drilled into us. You don't want to get dark.
Want to do that.
You do not want to be in the sun and get dark. And it's like, why? And here as an adult, and I think about, I have, there's her daughter who really embraced that and was like, oh no, I don't want to get any darker. And really had a hard time accepting the fact that she was naturally darker. And so that caused her to do other things, trying to lighten her skin, and impacted the way that she may wear her hair, like trying to present in a way that would have her be more accepted, since her skin may not be accepted, was the messaging that she received. Where I, on the other, took it and ran with it. It's like, every summer I want to get as dark as possible, and embrace that. But it could really have long-term effects on the way that we see ourselves as worthy. If we get messages and images around our difference, one being poor versus the other kind of being more applauded, then we start to attach that to our self-worth and how much value we have as a person, and which is not true. If I were light-skinned and speaking the same way, you could get just as much out of what I have to say and contribute as if I were much darker. But the reality is, and I actually had someone tell me, the reality is, as a fat, Black, darker skinned woman, if there was someone who was smaller and lighter skinned, and we said the exact same thing, the likelihood that they would, be received and seen as less threatening is greater. And so that can really impact our self-esteem. It can impact, obviously, the progress and progression that we're able to make. So personally, I may not elevate and make as many strides as someone who is lighter skinned with maybe less education and less to say, just by the nature of looking at us.
Looking at you. That's
right?
true. That's true.
So that's at a personal level. And then as a people, we then would have to continue to fight not only amongst ourselves, but also among the greater society, right? And by being divided, it really doesn't allow us to address the larger issues.
Correct. Thank you, Dr. Dawkins. I want to ask a question about our hair too, because
Okay.
one of the most amazing things about our culture is the ability to be flexible and creative with our hair. And I love different hairstyles. I wear my hair natural, but I am not a hater. I love people who wear, the lace fronts, and wigs, and I love all of it. So how do you have any suggestions? Because, if I were to choose to do that, I think I have a strong enough sense of self that, I would know that because like, for instance, I went to Jamaica and I bought a wig just because I didn't really want to deal with my hair. But it was like, what I'm trying to say is, how can you do that and not feed into the narrative? Because some people are then attached to it. And they don't know how to take it off. And that's one thing when they're that way. But and this could be my own stuff. You can check me on it. I am open to it. But, when you have a child who's looking up to you and is getting their image of beauty from the way that mommy looks, if mommy has long blonde hair down to her butt, like all the time, and your child doesn't, I don't think I would believe I was beautiful if my hair wasn't like that, but my mom's always was. So I don't know if you can kind of speak to that. How can we do it in a way that we can accent our beauty and, be flexible and creative without sending the message that the way our hair is naturally comes out of our scalp is not beautiful?
Yeah. So I think it's all about conversations, and probably folks who have worked with me is like, you're always talking about talking, but that is really the best way for us to be able to share information with our kids. I was having a conversation last week with someone and said, a lot of even the messages and things that we've learned growing up, no one, and I think even you said earlier, no one explicitly said these things.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we have conversations about them. But when we were seeing them, we were curious. And so I would encourage families to inspire curiosity in your young kids and have these conversations around them. So the way I would talk with my kids, even I dye my hair, right? So my kids would see that my black roots are coming in right now because it's time for a touch up. But they may see me come from the salon and say like, well, mom, like your hair is blonde. Does it grow like that? No, it doesn't. But one thing that mommy likes to do is mommy likes to dye the front part of her hair blonde sometimes and have a couple of different colors. And then sometimes in the winter, I like it to be red. And then sometimes I like it to be black. But look at this person who does none of that and she's still beautiful.
Oh,
so when when you get to the age where you can pick and choose and style your hair, you can also make some decisions like that too, right? So I think even if for someone who does want to wear a wig all the time, I champion that. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do the glue and all of that. But
it's a lot of work.
Right? But at some point, it does come off, right? You take the wig off, you wash your hair, you replat, allowing your child to be a part of that process. Right? And see that and answer questions and say, this is what mommy does. Mommy loves having this, but this is what's under mommy's hair. Is her other hair that's also beautiful. And do you want to touch this hair? Do you want mommy? It looks just like yours, right? And mommy does that just like you do. And then likes to wear this wig, right? So involving them in the conversation so that they know why you're making those choices. And the fact that there are choices that you have made and that they can make different ones when they get to be that age, I think is super important.
I love that. And I just want to reiterate, I don't want no messages. I ain't saying you can't wear your wigs. You can't dye your hair. Don't get it twisted. Because I think it's beautiful. So, but as Dr. Dawkins was saying, if you do have children, make sure that you're communicating that their natural beauty is beautiful as well. Are there any resources that you know of that can help Black families discuss colorism, confront colorism, any of the above?
Sure. So I know we switched kind of our direction, but there is actually someone that I went to school with. I'm going to pull her up while we're talking right now, Dr. Sarah, who is really a big kind of advocate. She speaks a lot around colorism. Her Instagram is Colorism Healing. Dr. Sarah L. Webb is someone who talks a lot about colorism and the fact that it is a social system around kind of marginalization and areas of privilege. And so I think that kind of her work, her scholarly work around colorism is one that I would like to highlight as a dark-skinned Black woman kind of in the field doing this work. I think also just around kind of difference and really talking to kids about difference and having healthy conversations. There is a sex health educator that I actually follow who I think does a really good job about how to have conversations with kids in a way that really allows them to fully explore kind of who they are. And it's not just sexual related, but just around educating kids, like how to have appropriate levels of conversation with kids. And that is Dr. Lex James. And her Instagram handle is Lex Sex Doc. But again, she talks a lot about—
We're Facebook friends. I recognize, or maybe Instagram friends, but I know who you're talking about. Okay. I will make sure to leave both of those along with your information in the show notes when we're done.
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great. And I like those Instagrams though, because, it doesn't take like a lot of time to just go and just get some information and learn a little bit as you go. So that's great. Is there a myth along colorism that you'd like to debunk?
I think that all folks ascribe to and, kind of pick a side. I think that's a big myth,
Good. Yeah. Wait, do you think the myth is that we all do it or that we all don't do it?
That we all do it. So the myth is
we don't all do it?
We don't all do it, right? So I don't think so. So like I consider, and maybe because I'm speaking for myself, I think those kind of all or none rules, the answer is always going to be false. that all or none kind of happen, right? Because Black people don't exist in a monolith, right? But I think that I have come up against fair-skinned women who can say like, me being fair-skinned is not something I can change. If one way that I could express my membership in this Black community was the opportunity to be darker, I do it. I do it in a heartbeat because that seems to be what people feel like they need. While I appreciate and I love myself, I don't like the fact that we have these groupings within us that create kind of disconnect. And I'm someone, I am a chocolate, I'm in the middle. Oh, but I'd love to be dark. If I could not say that more, if you did not walk away from our time together, knowing that, to be richly dark is something that I have always appreciated, like appreciated.
But do you? Okay. So is it, and I don't, so you are saying that you haven't slightly appreciated the privilege, unearned privilege nonetheless, but of not being like chocolate dark. Like you don't think you've ever like, and again, I could be, I'm going through my work because I hope it's okay. You are the expert here, but I do think that we all hold some biases. And I think that we get in trouble when we don't acknowledge it, because then that's when we can perpetuate it. And I say this because let me speak for myself. I saw an Indian yesterday, in the gas station. And he was darker. Y'all can't see me, but Dr. Dawkins can. I have on a black top. And his skin, it was just, but it was so smooth and it was just so clear. And then he had what we would call good hair. And I couldn't help but look at that combination and think to myself, that's a very attractive man. And then I had to check myself because I was like, why am I saying that? You know what I mean? Like, am I really drawn to the way that he looks, or does he have features that are in such a way that I've been conditioned to think are favorable, as opposed to had he had that same exact complexion, but with nappy hair? And I remember just making that cautious decision while I was in the store. So I don't know if you want to like speak to that or whatever, because I know for myself, I grew up in the South, North Carolina. Okay. Light skin, long hair had benefits. And I had, and I, so for the longest time, I struggled big time because of it. And it wasn't until I made a conscious effort to check myself. But that doesn't mean like I've unlearned. Well, I guess I have, because I've become more educated and more aware, but that doesn't mean that the same biases that I grew up thinking about, I struggle. You know what I mean? I have to be cautious, or I'll go right back to it.
So I think there's a definite difference between acknowledging that there are certain privileges coming with being lighter, or, kind of being a part of a, kind of particular shade group, but not holding on to them, right? And not saying like, oh gosh, fingers crossed that I don't have a kid that comes out as dark as my shirt. Right. That's a very different attitude, and a very different positioning to hold. And so, yes.
Is that a bad position to hold? That what you just said?
I think that it's one that we should look at. Right.
I'm not gonna lie, both of my kids, I was like, just because, but for the same reasons that you're saying. It's because I know that there's going to be a little bit of an advantage to it. I'm not saying it's right. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. But this show is about being honest and being authentic. And I don't think I'll ever, either way, I was going to love him, But in my defense, my husband is this color because he's from Africa. So he has very, very dark skin. So there was a part of me that was just a little bit concerned about, if they inherited his skin complexion, what that would mean for them growing up. And there was a piece of a relief in me, the owner of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, the one who is all about Blackness, whatever. There was a little bit of relief in me in realizing, okay, that's a problem that my children will have to some degree, because, I'm not light, but they're not light, but they're not as dark as my husband.
Yeah. And so, again, examining kind of like where that comes from, and the fact that, like you said, it's not that it's the reality of the culture that we are growing up in, and the society, kind of societal view that is placed on very dark, very fair skin folks. But then now what responsibility do we have to communicate to our children about what it should mean?
Right.
And so that's why I say I think that that's a myth, that all folks live there and are resident there. You can acknowledge that level of privilege that is held for being further along on the spectrum than others. But as someone who has genuinely, I also grew up in the South. I grew up in Louisiana, where
you had it.
Creole, right?
Creole, yeah, you had it. Yeah, you saw it.
And then folks would always comment. My parents aren't from Louisiana, but folks would comment about the grade and texture of my hair, my mother's hair, my father's hair, despite the fact that we were brown skin. And it was kind of like, that's so strange, because that's not the messaging or the imaging that I heard in my home. And so I find that really contributed to an appreciation of the shades that Black came in, and to say that just because so one person can maybe have the experience that you had seeing the gentleman at the gas station and kind of say like, oh, what an appreciation for the clearness of the skin and just kind of like the shade, and saying like, all of that is beautiful, and is equally as beautiful as mine, and not have to kind of say like, all right, us brown skinned girls, we got to stick together, like
right
coming for us, because I think what the danger that we get into is what is experienced in other cultures, thinking about brown skinned people infiltrating and kind of developing a melting pot, right? If we think about, keeping fair skinned folks fair skin, if we think about keeping brown skinned folks brown skin, and keeping our darker chocolate folks chocolate, we don't allow for the fact that there is that level of variation. Right? And we then look like we're avoiding like mixing our colors. And that can have long-term effects.
It can. Thank you for that. Just a quick story. Just you made me think of it with that. But back to when I was watching the light skin versus dark skin directory. I mean, on Oprah documentary. It's funny because my husband, he likes to be real like tough and macho, but sometimes I'll be watching these like chick flicks or things like that, and he'll be like kind of peeping in and try to peep it out. And I remember he sat down was really into this. And then he goes, Connie, now we have been married at this point, maybe a couple of years. He goes, are you light skin or dark skin? And I just remember it really just resonated with me because, in his culture that did not have any major, first of all, everybody, I mean, there are some lighter people, but for the most part, most of the people around his same complexion, and it didn't have any major context.
Yeah.
And so it meant nothing to him. And I'm like, here, that meant everything. So well, I'm glad we had this conversation. Yes, we did kind of get our conversation did try to transition, but I think this is a much needed topic, and you definitely have given us a lot to think about. What we're going to do now is transition to a part of the show called What's Good. And What's Good is just a place where I give a hypothetical situation and then I ask for your clinical expertise. Is that okay, Dr. Dawkins? Sure. Okay. What's good? Meet Tasha. Tasha is a 16-year-old African and African-American first-generation high school student. Okay. She lives with her mother, who is married to a German white male, and they have a son who is biracial. Okay. Tasha struggles with her self-image of being dark-skinned, coarser hair, we would probably call it nappy, and fuller figured when her mother is smaller and petite and has fair complexion. Of course, her stepdad is white, and her younger brother is of mixed heritage. Okay. How would you advise Tasha to feel confident, even though she's on the negative end of this color spectrum in her family?
Yeah. So I would encourage Tasha to think a little bit about the aspects of herself that she does like and appreciate. And so I would always encourage someone to kind of start with themselves, and think a little bit about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to physical features. Actually, probably would prefer that it isn't, but think about the aspects of themselves that they like, things that they really do well. And sometimes people have a hard time coming up with that. And so I said, well, if I were to ask your mom, if I were to ask your dad, what are things that are good about you? If I were to ask your best friend, what would they say is a special trait or quality that you have? And I want you to list those out for me. And then taking a look at those and thinking about what is really important and what do you want to amplify? What do you want to be known for? Do you want to be known for being aesthetically in this way, or do you want to be known for some of the things that you've listed? And it doesn't really matter what the choice is. I'm just offering an opportunity. What is it that you'd like to be known for? And then I think that it's really important for Tasha to then share some of her experience and views with her mom, because her mom may have absolutely no idea that that is her reality, especially if her mom has lived in this very fair skin world and is raising a multiracial child. Her mom may have absolutely no experience of Tasha's experience when it comes to the images and messages that she's getting. May just be ignorant. So it's important for her to share that with mom. And then I think it's important for mom to recognize that she may not then be able to give Tasha what she needs in terms of observation of representation. Tasha needs to see women who have accepted their standard of beauty and are using it in the way that they see fit and are showing up and showing out in the world the way that they desire to. And so connecting Tasha in ways that she's able to do that is going to be super important. So that looks like women, finding women online, finding a community of women within their community that can really challenge her to accept aspects of herself that are unique and different and should be celebrated.
Good, very good. I just want to piggyback off of that really quickly, just to fine tune it just a little bit more. Discussing privilege is difficult. And I think it's a little bit easier, unfortunately, for those without the privilege, because at least it generates a level of empathy. So my white friends that I can talk to about race with, I enjoy it. It's like they automatically, in fact, I've noticed one of my good friends, she's even hesitant really to complain about anything because she feels, especially with me, because it's like she knows that whatever issue she has as a Black woman, mine is going, it will be different. But anyway, I say that to say, when you're on the receiving end of privilege, right? So when you're the light-skinned, blonde hair, long hair, good hair person, there's an element of guilt, I think, though like you said, you can't choose it. You don't mean to make it that way. So how can you work through, how do you have any skills for, because I just think about this with, my mom, she's not like white, but she's a lot lighter than me. And not a lot, but she is lighter than me. And she definitely has what will be considered good hair and is longer. And so I remember as an adult, she avoided it as a child because she was just hoping it would go away. I think she noticed it, but she didn't know what to say. She's like, yeah, I'm lighter than you. Like, what do you do? So as an adult, I can tell that she's, we've been able to have the conversation, and she's been like, it's almost like she feels bad. Like she, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which I don't want her to feel bad. I just want her to understand, and this has become more important because my daughter looks like me. Right. It's funny, she looks like my mom, but she has my features. So how does a person who benefits from that unearned privilege address it, and not, because without feeling guilty like they did something wrong?
I'm going to be honest with you, Dr. Omari. I don't know that there's a way to avoid the guilt. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think about this work and that process as being very similar to anti-racism work that we ask for people of privilege to do. Mm-hmm. And in order to be anti-racist, it's not saying I'm not racist. It's saying I acknowledge that racism exists and that I will consciously make an effort towards being more, anti-racist in my attitudes, beliefs, positions, and behaviors. And so for someone who benefits from privilege, acknowledging that privilege exists is super important. And then being a part of saying this level of privilege is not okay. And so whether that is in their own attitude, so there may be some work that our fair skinned folks need to do if they hold this belief that because they are fair skinned, that they should have different levels of access, mm-hmm. that they are inherently better. Mm-hmm. That is something that has to be unlearned, because that attitude is not okay. It's not the fact that you are fair skinned that's the problem. It's the fact that you are fair skinned and believe that you are better than someone who is not, that is the problem. And so being able to acknowledge areas of privilege and be a active participant and an agent of change around held attitudes and beliefs. So when you see a level of discrimination happening against someone who is darker than you, being able to call it out, being able to educate others about the fact that you should not receive separate treatment. And part of that, like we say to our white counterparts, maybe having to give up that privilege in the process of advocating that others receive equitable treatment.
Very good.
And so I think that is the message that I would say to someone who benefits from having a level of privilege that comes with colorism, is that it is going to be hard work. It is not going to feel good. But if you are truly interested in seeing issues around colorism eradicated, then that means doing the work and making that a part of your daily commitment.
Love it. Love it. I love everything about what we discussed today. It was a much needed conversation. Thank you for your flexibility and being, this is a true expert when we can start on one subject and transition to something else and not skip a beat. So I appreciate that. I know our guests are going to want to follow up with you. So please, how can they get in touch with you and find you online?
Sure. So they can visit my website, which is www.revolutionaryperspectives.com. Same Instagram handle, Revolutionary Perspectives. Same on Facebook, Revolutionary Perspectives LLC. I'm also on TikTok and
all right. Yes, you TikTok. Yes,
everywhere.
All right.
And Clubhouse under Revo Perspects. But feel free to Google me, Erika with a K, Erika, M Dawkins, and I should pop up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. You are amazing, and your feedback has been just priceless. And I know you've inspired others because you've inspired me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Since you've listened all the way through, come on in and join the family. If you haven't done so yet, please join our free community where we offer weekly trainings and monthly giveaways. We can be found on Facebook under the Black Marriage and Families Matter Facebook group. And since you're serious about joining our family, we also invite you to join our All In campaign, which signifies your commitment to go all in, not only for yourself, but in helping us reach more people by downloading this podcast wherever you are listening to it, leaving us a review, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This really helps us reach more people and change more lives. After all, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we can all get more done together than we can apart. With that said, I want to encourage you to share this episode with just 3 other people who you think might also benefit from our community and what we are offering, with the hopes that all of you can join our All In campaign. When you're done, simply click the link All In campaign in the bio and receive a free copy of my course entitled Goodbye Toxicity, which is valued at $297. This course will help you to work through some of the difficult experiences that arise in most of our relationships, and it's completely free to you with your commitment to join our All In campaign. We look forward to connecting with you every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening.